Hello. Today we're going to look at a claim made by Norman Finkelstein, one of the head advocates against Israel in the following decade or so. We're going to look at one of his claims, we're going to grapple with what he says, and we're going to give some examples. So let's start. So who is Norman Finkelstein? According to Wikipedia, Norman Finkelstein is an American political scientist and activist. His primary fields of research are the politics of the Holocaust and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He also taught at some American universities, and he rose to prominence in 2000 after publishing The Holocaust Industry, a book in which he writes that the memory of the Holocaust is exploited as an ideological weapon to provide Israel a degree of immunity from criticism. And through personal accounts in one of his books, he compares the plight of the Palestinians living under Israeli occupation with the horrors of the Nazis. Okay, so this is Norman Finkelstein, very famous advocator against Israel, and we're going to look at some video that he published something like 10 years ago about him being a self-hating Jew and the validity of this claim to his claims. Let's see.
The question, namely the question of, would I like to comment on the question of whether I am a self-hating Jew? Which, it's a reasonable question. People have the right to ask it. It does seem to me, though, to be totally irrelevant, and allow me to explain why. As you probably know, during the Nazi era, the Nazis liked to refer to Jewish physics, namely Einstein. And they liked to refer to Jewish psychoanalysis, namely Freud, because Freud and his whole school were Jewish, overwhelmingly. Now, a rational person, it seems to me, doesn't care about the background of the person. Physics doesn't become true or false based on whether or not the main physicists are Jewish. And psychoanalysis doesn't become true or false based on the background of the main psychoanalysts who happen to be Jewish. Whether it's true or not, it's independent of, as it were, the intellectual messenger. For a rational person, the only thing that counts is the message. So my answer to you is, for argument's sake, let's agree with the insinuation that I'm a self-hating Jew. Let's agree with it. How does that change the facts? Isn't it, for a rational person, shouldn't the only issue be whether what I'm saying is true or false? I don't see how my background figures at all in this particular issue, any more than Einstein's Jewish heritage figured in whether or not E equals mc squared.
So, what Finkelstein basically says here is that, let's say that he is a self-hating Jew, let's say that he looks at Jews as something detrimental to the world. This fact doesn't detract from his claims about the crimes that Israel commits or the validity of his theories about Israel and what happens in Israel. Just like Einstein, let's say if Einstein were a self-hating Jew, still his physical understanding of the world won't be lesser for it. So E would still equal mc squared even if Einstein was a self-hating Jew. Now, to grapple with this claim, we first need to differentiate between physics and the humanities. In physics, you measure the world in a very neutral way. You measure the world in ways that are really detached from your physical actual existence as a human, aside from your senses or things like that. But in the humanities, the way that you look at things really changes your perspective. Let's say you are a Holocaust survivor, then your view on the world would be much different than, let's say, an Afro-American living today in the United States. Not that these two are somehow related to each other, but that your personal experience or your personal thoughts about the world shape the way that your research goes on. So if I am a person who hates Jews, then my research on Jews would necessarily be biased and be problematic. And to look at that, let's see how my counter argument, let's see an example of it in the works of Finkelstein himself. So to look at it, we're going to see one of the books that he published, Method and Madness, published in 2014 after something like 8 years in which Finkelstein wrote notes on things that Israel does, especially on two wars or big operations that Israel had in Gaza, one in 2008 called Cast Lead, and the other one in 2012 called Pillar of Defense. So let's see how Finkelstein described these two events that are the bulk of his book, aside from the siege on Gaza, and how his view on Jews affect the way that he views facts and his conclusions. Let's see. So let's start with his introduction. And in this introduction, he claims that the book chronicles and analyzes the various Israeli assaults in Operation Cast Lead and Pillar of Defense. It casts doubt on the accepted interpretation of their key triggers, features, and consequences, meaning that the world has a certain view on these things, and he is going to show the true consequence of events, series of events, sequence of events, and he is going to explain why his view is the more correct one. So what are his views? So let's start with his first chapter, in which Finkelstein explains Operation Cast Lead as follows. In June 2008, let's just make it a bit larger. In June 2008, Hamas and Israel entered into a ceasefire brokered by Egypt. But in November of that year, Israel violated the ceasefire by carrying out a bloody border raid on Gaza. Israel modus operandi recalled the February 1955 border raid, something that I talk about in one of my first videos, during the build-up to the 1956 Sinai invasion. The objective then and now was to instigate a backlash that Israel could exploit as a pretext for a full-blown assault, meaning that for Finkelstein, the whole Operation Cast Lead in 2008 was just a ruse. By everything that happened before that was just a ruse for Israel to start a war. Israel really wants wars. It loves wars. It wants to kill as many people as possible, and it really tries to taunt the Palestinians into a fight so that it could violate a ceasefire, so that it could murder as many Palestinians as possible or just start a war. And then he moves on to describe the war. But let's look at events, actual events that happened. For that, I'm going to look at newspaper articles that Wikipedia in Hebrew cites that really chronicles the events that led to Operation Cast Lead. So let's see them. It's over here, and this is in Hebrew. I'll give a quick translation for them. All of these events their sources are from two main sites. One is a site that is called Haaretz, which is a very left-leaning liberal newspaper in Israel, really critical about Israel's foreign policy and domestic issues, really secular. It's also against traditional conservative Jews. And the other one is now a defunct site called NRG. NRG it was part of the property of Ma'ariv, which is more a conservative form of newspaper. So this is a balanced portrayal of events, even though I won't get into how they describe the events, only the events themselves, which I also, as an Israeli citizen, vaguely remember. It was more than 15 years ago, but I remember them somewhat as a person who was just after his military service. I remember these things. So let's look at the events that Finkelstein really just shrugs off as a ruse of Israel to start a war. And he explains that in the site, the Wikipedia page explains that Operation Cast Lead, the first thing that really instigated this thing, was an incident, a very famous incident in the 25th of June 2006, where one Israeli soldier was kidnapped and two others were killed in an infiltration attempt by Hamas. And it also succeeded in Kerem Shalom. I'll also provide a map if you want. Kerem Shalom is here. It's in the southern part of Gaza. It's one of the main border points in Gaza where Gazans can come and enter while being, of course, monitored and checked by soldiers to Israel, to the southwestern part of Israel. So this is Khan Yunis and Rafiach in the south, and Kerem Shalom is this checkpoint at the border and on the Israeli side, and this is where this thing happened. So the Hamas raid on Kerem Shalom resulted in the kidnapping of one soldier called Gilad Shalit. This was the first time that a soldier was kidnapped into Gaza, and this was a shock. I remember at the time I was in the army. It was a really frightening thing. The army was shocked. There is how did such a thing happen? And after looking and searching, they found out that there was a tunnel that led to Kerem Shalom from the southern part of Gaza, and the army was just frightened from it. They were shitting their pants. They really tried to prevent such a thing from happening, and the whole scare from tunnels really started, and for a good reason too. Now, by the way, many years later, not many, but some years later, Gilad Shalit was freed, and thousands of Palestinian military militians who were arrested in Israel after doing a lot of terror attacks. One of them, by the way, who is now the person that Israel searches in Gaza, one of the most wanted people in Gaza, Sinwar. He was released from Israel after this kidnapping of Gilad Shalit to get Gilad Shalit back. So this is the first event that happened in 2006. Then an Israeli raid was conducted into Bet Hanun, which is in the northern part of Israel. I know this very good because this is just across Sderot. I live in Sderot, so and they always fire rockets from there. So from Bet Hanun, there was an Israeli raid to this part, to this northern eastern part of Gaza, to stop rockets getting fired into Sderot. And indeed, they found there 7 missile batteries at some orchards pointing to Sderot, and the purpose of this military raid was to destroy these rocket launchers, missile launchers. Okay, so this is something that happened in the 5th of July 2007. Then a tunnel was found in Bet Laya, which is a bit western to Bet Hanun. It's over here. This is what is written in Arabic, Bet Laya. So here in Bet Laya, what happened is that another raid was conducted from Israel, and in this raid they found a war tunnel that almost crossed to Nativa Asara, which is an Israeli kibbutz that is just here, as you can see. So you can understand why Israel is doing all of these raids. It is really afraid of all of these tunnels. I think this is a very logical conclusion, that after a soldier was kidnapped and 2 soldiers were killed for the first time by a tunnel that crossed into Israel from Gaza, you would do raids, according to intel, to search for tunnels. And indeed, they found one in the 14th of August. In the 6th of September 2007, Hamas members used the truck and civilian cars were stopped by Israel just before they were about to kidnap some soldiers. And this happened in August. So again, Israel is afraid of soldiers being kidnapped and everything that gets into the border, especially armored cars and militias. Israel is really scared from it and tries to prevent it. And the 6th of September, Hamas members, at the 11th of September, a Qassam rocket injured 69 soldiers in the recruit base Zikim. Zikim is northern here. This is Zikim. So they shot rockets at Zikim in Israel. And this caused the injury of 69 soldiers. You see that we have here an escalation. In 19th September, 2,000 rockets were fired to all the kibbutzim and to Sderot around Gaza. So we have Qassam fire, missile fire into Sderot, Erez, Nir'am, Kfar Aza, Nachalo, Zalumim, Be'eri, Kisufim, all of these villages, then and a town, Sderot is a town, city, they were all being fired by Gaza. Missiles were fired at them. And in October 2007, more than 7 tunnels were found next to the border in Israel, close border raids. So we have here other border raids during October where they found 7 tunnels trying to reach Israel. And you can understand why Israel is so afraid of these tunnels. In the 15th of January, a farmer is killed by Hamas fire in En HaShlosha, here at the southern part of the Gaza Strip on the Israeli side. A farmer is killed. Then in February, Hamas fires 42 rockets at Sderot, my town. Okay, so they fire 42 rockets at it. Okay, in the 6th of March 2008, 30 rockets are fired at Sderot and Nir Oz. And 2 soldiers are killed in a fence border patrol by explosives planted there. So we can see here that they keep shooting rockets at Israel, also in the southern part, also in the northern part, and they also try to booby trap defense that is around Gaza to harm any Israeli soldiers that are passing there to look for tunnels. Then Hamas, in the 8th of April, they unearthed a tunnel dug from Gaza, which almost crossed the border. 2 Israeli civilians are killed in Karni crossing by the Islamic Jihad, open fire at the crossing. 30 Qassam rockets are fired at Sderot. Again, so we see here how Hamas keeps firing rockets trying to dig tunnels into Israel to harm civilians and also to harm soldiers. Okay, then we see here that Hamas is using armed vehicles, heavy suppression fire, mortar fire, and 2 explosive cars to attack Kerem Shalom, again the place where the soldier in 2006 was kidnapped. They try to attack the checkpoint, the border point itself, and then they shoot 117 Qassam rockets all around the Gaza Strip in all around what is the envelope of Gaza in May 2008. 3 Hamas members tried to plant explosives on the border fence in 11th of June 2008. And then what Finkelstein described, there is the Egyptian intervention, and Hamas decides to stop all of the attacks on Israel, and Israel decides to stop the raids. But then, only 5 days later, Hamas shoots 7 rockets at Sderot, and 2 civilians are badly injured. In November, Israel indeed is doing the raid that Finkelstein described as a baseless raid, a bloody raid just to kill Palestinians. Israel raids the few hundred meters beyond the fence in Gaza and unearths a tunnel 300 meters from a Jewish village. Dozens of rockets are fired at Sderot and Ashkelon as a result of this raid. That the purpose of this raid was because Intel found a tunnel that was just about to cross Israel, just 300 meters from the border, and they decided to destroy it. Hamas is angry. How dare you stop our tunnels from kidnapping your soldiers? And they shot rockets at Sderot and Ashkelon, which is a much bigger town over here. My parents live there, and this is what happened that really led to the war. In November and December, 215 rockets are fired in 1 month all over the place, and then 60 rockets in 1 day. And then 24th of December at Ashkelon, Sderot and Netivot, which is here, which is a bit farther. So we see here that Hamas also shows its power, how they can shoot even farther than the Gaza envelope, and they taunt Israel by doing so. Now, all of these things are understood by Finkelstein as baseless, that in fact Israel doesn't have any right to do these raids, and the Palestinians have all the right to fire these rockets at Israeli citizens. So we can see here that in his first chapter, this claim that Israel is only doing what it does to instigate a war, that it is the aggressor here, that it is the one who only tries to annoy the Palestinians for no reason other than start a war, is not exactly true to the actual facts that led to Operation Cast Lead. Another thing that I would like to address that is also problematic with Finkelstein's description is what Hamas actually believes, what Hamas actually says. According to Finkelstein, Hamas really wanted peace. So could Israel really trust this ceasefire as a plan for a further peace agreement with Hamas? To answer that, we need to see what Hamas actually believes. Let's look at their creed. Let's look at the Hamas Islamic Resistant Creed. Let's see what they say. A document of general principles and policies. This is from 2017. They revised it and they took all the blatantly jihadist and at times extremely anti-Semitic things that they had before, even though it is still horrible as it is in 2017. But let's say we live in 2008. What Israel knew about the what Hamas believes. So let's look at the 2008, the 1988, which wasn't changed until 2017, the Hamas covenant. So let's look at that, how Israel and its policymakers, how they should really understand Hamas. So first of all, Hamas clearly stated at 1988, and it was still relevant to 2008, that in fact our struggle is against the Jews, and it is very great and very serious. They use here their creed to explain to the Arab and Muslim world and every other people around them that their struggle is against the Jews, not only against Israel, but against the Jews in really in general. And it says that Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it. So their purpose is to obliterate Israel. It's not only to stop the border, the siege, it is to obliterate Israel. This is why the siege, by the way, was erected, because they clearly stated that they want to kill everyone in Israel. So Israel really need to stop them from doing that, erecting a wall, a fence, and stopping them from killing people. And let's see what they say. So first of all, they say the Islamic resistant movement, the movement program is Islam. From it draws its ideas, ways of thinking, and understanding of the universe, life, and man. It resorts to it for judgment in all its conduct, and it is inspired by it for guidance of its steps. So they clearly state that they adopt Islam and in anything of their way of life. Let's see what is their way of life. In Article 7, they want that Islamic resistance movement spread all over the world, rally support for it, and strive towards enhancing its struggle. So it's not only in Israel, they want the struggle to be worldwide of Islam against people who piss off Islam. On this basis, the movement should be viewed and evaluated, and it should be recognized. He who denies its right, evades supporting it, and turns a blind eye to facts, whether intentionally or unintentionally, will awaken to see that events have overtaken him. And with no logic to justify his attitude, one should certainly learn from past examples. So they say that their movement is one of the links in the chains of the struggle against the Zionist invaders. It goes back to 1939, to the emergence of the martyrs Adin al-Qassam, which is someone that the British killed, starting the Arab rebellion. if the links have been distant from each other and placed by those who are the lackeys of Zionism in the way of the fighters obstructed the continuation of the struggle, the Islamic resistance movement aspires to the realization of Allah's promise to destroy Israel. Okay, so this is what they want, the day of judgment, where the Muslims fight the Jews, killing the Jews. They cite here from al-Bukhari to a hadith in the Quran, and then they cite the Quran. When the Jew will hide behind stones and trees, the stone and trees will say, "Oh Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." So they clearly state that their purpose is to kill every Jew, and that Islam would rule over the world. And there in Article 11, they say that they believe that the land of Palestine is Islamic Waqf, meaning that it is a holy place to Muslims, and Muslims must free all of it, even though I don't know how exactly they understand it, because the land of Israel today is a result of the mandate of Palestine by the British. The British created the borders of Israel today, but they have decided that this was holy. The borders of Israel that the British created was holy since Muhammad lived. Okay, I don't know. And the law governing the land of Palestine is the Sharia law. So if they would conquer Israel, they would expel all the Jews or kill them, and then they would implement Sharia law all over Israel, the Muslim mandatory law. And here in Article 13, they say that they want jihad, but the Jews will not be pleased with it, neither the Christians. Here they cite the second surah of the Quran. Until thou follow the religion, the direction of Allah is the true direction. So if you are under Jewish law, you are against Allah. There is no solution for the Palestinian question except through jihad. So they cannot solve the problems of the Palestinians through peace. They must fight until Israel is obliterated and every Jew is killed. They say so explicitly. And let's move on. Let's say perhaps they are only against Israel and they're fine with Jews. But here they say for a long time the enemies have been planning skillfully and with precision for the achievement of what they have attained. They took into consideration the causes, blah, 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 blah. And here they say with their money, they form secret societies such as Freemasons, Rotary clubs, the Lions, and others in different parts of the world. So Israel is part of a whole Jewish conspiracy. They were behind World War I, and they were able to destroy the Islamic Caliphate, meaning that the Ottoman Empire was a perfect thing, a beautiful thing of Islam, and through secret organizations and through manipulations, the Jews have started World War I. They were behind World War II even. What the Nazis did, killing the Jews were behind that. Oh, good. So often as they shall kindle a fire for war, Allah shall extinguish it, and they shall set their minds to act corruptly in the earth. But Allah loveth not the corrupt doers, so the Jews are corrupt. The imperialist forces in the capitalist West and communist East support the enemy with all their might, so Jews control the capitalist West and the communist East. In this time in 1988, when it was published, this thing, the Soviet Union was still around. So Jews they control the Soviet Union, and they also control the West. Okay, so this is what these people believe. And here in Article 28, they said the Zionist invasion is a vicious invasion. It doesn't refrain from resorting to all methods, using evil and contemptible ways to achieve its end. And then all these organizations, Freemasons, the Lions, the Rotaries, I don't know who these guys are, they work in the interest of Zionism and according to its instructions, so Jews control the world. And then Jews in 1967 stood on the threshold of Al-Aqsa Mosque and proclaimed, Muhammad is dead and his descendants are all women. I don't know where they took it from, their wild, crazy imaginations. And then Israel, Judaism, and Jews challenged Islam, and the Muslim people made the cowards never sleep. So we see here that Israel, when it deals with these guys, they really need to be careful, because these guys are not rational people. They believe in conspiracy theories. They are extremely anti-Semitic. They are devout, fanatic Muslims. And when they shoot at Israel and say, okay, let's stop now, do they really believe in peace? So the Israeli policymakers in 2008, when they decided to start their bloody war on Gaza, all of these things were before their eyes, and they decided to stop that. All the rockets fired at them, all the tunnels that Hamas dug, they look at the ceasefire as something that the Palestinians in Gaza, Hamas-led Palestinians, didn't really meant to keep in the long run. And indeed, several days later, they kept firing at Israel to show that what they really think about the ceasefire. So we see here that the Israeli war of 2008, Operation Cast Lead, was not made because Israel just wanted to kill as many Palestinians as possible, but we see here clear, valid points, rational points why Israel would like to stop Hamas violence against its citizens. Let's see another example from the book, this time from the end of the book, where Finkelstein discusses Operation Pillar of Defense. Let's look. Okay, so in page 121. In page 121, where Finkelstein discusses Operation Cast Lead in chapter called Go Ahead, Invade, on the 14th of November 2012, Israel launched Operation Pillar of Defense. According to the official storyline, the assault began only after it had stoically absorbed hundreds of Hamas projectile attacks. The facts, however, suggest otherwise. From the start of 2012, one Israeli had been killed as a result of Palestinian attacks, while 78 Palestinians had been killed by Israeli strikes. Hamas had mostly steered clear of armed confrontation since Operation Cast Lead. In the methodical madness that is Israeli policy towards Gaza, Ahmed al-Jabri, the Hamas leader, whose assassination by Israel triggered the new round of fighting, had served as Israel's subcontractor for enforcing the periodic ceasefires. In fact, he was in the process of advancing a permanent ceasefire agreement when Israel liquidated him. The source for this is Haaretz Journal, as I said, a very far left-leaning liberal journal in Israel. Many of its articles are not exactly accurate. Okay, so this is what Finkelstein says here. Let's move on in the chapter to see what he actually claims about Operation Cast Lead, aside from it being a madness of Israel to stop peace-loving Hamas. Many Palestinians have inferred from the resounding defeat inflicted on Israel. This is after the operation, where, like in every other operation, the world says that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza and Israel needs to get out of Gaza and let the Hamas keep shooting rockets at them at their leisure and dig in tunnels to kidnap and kill their citizens, because it's just a little thing, 10,000 people getting, 1,500 people getting killed, just 100 people getting kidnapped, just 100,000s of citizens living in fear of being shot by rockets. It's nothing, come on, compared to the suffering of the Palestinians, of course. So the Israelis should just stoically wait for the next rocket or for the tunnel to be dug and people to be kidnapped, because, many Palestinians have inferred from the resounding defeat inflicted on Israel that only armed resistance can and will end the Israeli occupation. And again, as we've seen, Hamas doesn't believe in an Israeli occupation of Gaza. He believes in an Israeli occupation of the whole of this Waqf, this holy place to the Muslim. In fact, however, Hamas's armed resistance operated for the most part only at the level of perceptions. The projectiles heading towards Tel Aviv did unsettle the city's residents. A nuisance. The rockets, thousands of rockets being fired at you, a nuisance, nothing more. Let's see another thing in page 152, where he gets into the conclusion of Operation Pillar of Defense. By this standard, the people of Gaza surely have the right to use makeshift projectiles, nothing more than makeshift projectiles, to end an illegal, merciless 7-year-long Israeli blockade or to end Israel's criminal bombardment. But if a state might have the right to use nuclear weapons when its survival is at stake, then surely a people struggling for self-determination has the right to use makeshift projectiles when its survival is at stake. So according to Finkelstein, all the things that the Palestinians, all the tunnels and the rockets that we've seen in Operation Cast Lead, they're just a nuisance. They never really harm any Israeli. They're just something like a fly that really bothers you, nothing more, a nuisance, nothing more than that. So let's see the events from 2008 to 2012. Again, we're going to look at Wikipedia and again in Hebrew, we're going to see all the fighting that happened during these years. So again, I'll give here my Hebrew translation. So in January 27, a border patrol on the Israeli side is hurt by an explosive device planted. Again, an Israeli soldier is dead by an explosive on the Israeli side. In February 29, 88 rockets are fired at Sderot. Let's see the number of rockets fired. We can see here that since 2008 to 2012, there is a decline in rockets, but it is still somewhere around 500 rockets a year. Not so bad. Let's say Mexico would shoot just 500 rockets a year at southern Texas. Nothing bad, I think. Okay, so again, so we see here that 88 rockets were fired at Sderot, Ashkelon, and Netivot. Let's see again the map. Okay, so they're fired at Sderot, Ashkelon, and Netivot. Farther, Hamas is trying to show that they can shoot further, they have better technology. 282 rockets and 193 mortar shells are fired at Israel until the end of 2009. A Hornet rocket, something that is more sophisticated, meaning that all the border here from Egypt, which Egypt promised to keep weapons entering Gaza, they just shit on the agreement with Israel. They let high-tech weapon enter Gaza. So a Hornet rocket is fired at an Israeli tank. Okay, no one is hurt, so everything is fine. But just 4 months later, 5 months later, a Hornet rocket is fired at a children's bus that only had one kid. Luckily, because it was early in the morning, so only one kid has died. Well, nothing that bad, just perceptions, according to Finkelstein. Hamas supporters in Egypt crossed the Egyptian border and fire on an Israeli civilian bus next to Eilat. So it is much southern. You don't see here on the map because the border with Egypt just goes on more south. So 6 Israeli civilians are killed by supporters of Hamas, and Israel kills them. These attackers who killed civilians. So Hamas is angry that Israel dares to shoot at people trying to kill it, so they shoot rockets at Israel to show them you wouldn't dare shooting back when we try to kill you. So in 9th of March 2012, Israel kills a Hamas official on the way to direct dozens of Hamas members to plant explosives. Hamas shoots 300 rockets at Israel that again dares to stop someone trying to booby trap its border and kill soldiers patrolling the border. How dare you? Hamas, in the 18th of June 2012, Hamas supporters from Egypt again kill 1 Israeli civilian in a raid next to the Sinai border, again here. And what happens is that Israel again kills the persons, the attackers who come from Egypt, and Hamas again, how dare you shoot people who try to kill you, and they shoot rockets at Israel. And they do it for several days, 5 days of non-stop bombardment of Israel. Israel kills 1 world jihadist member that was on his way to plant explosive on the border. Again, we see here the pattern. Just like in 2008, we saw the pattern of them trying to dig tunnels. When Israel tries to stop the tunnels, they shoot rockets at Israel for daring to stop the tunnels. Here we see that people outside of Israel, by the way, not necessarily Hamas, jihadist members, people from Egypt, when they try to kill Israeli civilians and soldiers on the border, when Israel intervenes and try to stop them killing its citizens, then Hamas, how dare you, and then it shoots rockets again at the cities, the farther cities, to show that it can. An explosive tunnel destroys a military jeep on the Israeli side of the border on the 8th of November 2012. On the 10th of November, an anti-tank missile fires a rocket at an Israeli jeep on the Israeli side of the border. The IDF shoots back at those firing the rockets, and again, Hamas, how dare you shoot back at people, our people shooting you, and then they shoot rockets, and then on the 12th of November, 100 rockets are fired at Israel, and then the war starts. After Israel had enough, after 3 years where Israel tries to prevent Hamas killing its citizens and shooting rockets at it. But according to Finkelstein, Israel did it as a ruse to kill as many Palestinians as possible because Israel likes blood, Palestinian blood, probably. Also, his understanding of all of these rockets is how we call it perceptions, as really minor things, makeshift missiles. he probably never lived in a bombarded city. I live in Sderot. I know what it is to have children who can't sleep at night, who pee their bed, who are always on the edge of hearing a siren, of hearing red color, Tseva Adon. This is how the alarm in Israel really sounds. In Sderot, in Ashkelon, it's just the sound, and people are terrified. People need to live, 100,000 people need to live in constant fear that perhaps a tunnel would cross their border, that a rocket would kill them. Why so many Israelis weren't harmed physically by it is because Israel has Iron Dome. It has bomb shelters everywhere. So whenever you hear the alarm, you just take the kids. The kids are in school just learning math, and then the kindergarten teacher or the homeroom teacher just takes them and they run into the bomb shelter while the kids cry, or perhaps it's an extracurricular activity. Parents are worried, but okay, it's nothing. It's just perception. The fact that there are 100,000 people with mental problems because of that, and people can't really sleep at night just because their neighbors decided to kill them. So this is something that Finkelstein really just shrugs off as perceptions because he lives in the United States and he never experienced that. Let's say Mexico would decide to shoot hundreds of rockets every day and to dig tunnels into the United States at the place that Finkelstein lives. Perhaps he would think otherwise, but for him, this is just perceptions and nothing that people need to worry about. So we have seen here that Finkelstein is really anti-Israel, and his hatred towards Israel, I won't say that he's a self-hating Jew, but he's a self-hating Israeli, a Jew who hates Israel. This really makes his conclusions of the facts ignore the Israeli suffering, ignore the Israeli side, ignore all facts that really show that Israel tries to defend its citizens, and we have seen all the facts. We have seen that Israel was taunted time and time and time again, that the people from Gaza and Hamas and other terrorist organizations tried to harm its civilians again and again, and through tunnels, through explosives, through rockets. And only when thousands of rockets have been fired and hundreds of border incidents happen, only then Israel says enough is enough. We can't keep our citizens, our civilians on the edge. And I know as a people who live in Sderot, I know that many people in Sderot were angry how they keep shooting at us. Stop them. You are a government that has no right to rule if you can't defend your citizens. But according to Finkelstein, well, perhaps the people of Israel need to die because Israel is born in sin. It's just a monstrous evil entity that was never meant to be at all, just like Hamas. So he adopts the Hamas narrative completely. By the way, and it is important, Finkelstein is not pro-war. While he celebrates Hamas attacks on Israel, he says at the end of his book that he believes that a better way would be to negotiate for peace, to be a peaceful people. Apparently, he hasn't read the Hamas manifesto that says otherwise, that says that they would never sue for peace because this is a holy place for them and they would not rest until all the land. And they say so in their 2017 manifesto. They're revised, the more subtle one. They say here that the land of Palestine extends from the river Jordan to the east of the Mediterranean in the west, from Ras Nekorat in the north to El Rashrash in the south, from Elat to the northern part of Israel, is an integral territorial unit, because somehow the British, by dividing this land, somehow made it a holy place and also home of the Palestinian people. Some places of Israel were supposed to be parts of Jordan and Syria and Lebanon. The Palestinians were fine with this until the Zionists really came, but they decided that somehow by really making the border, the British made ancient people exist suddenly from thin air. So the expulsion and banishment of the Palestinian people from the land and the establishment of the Zionist entity, they would never say Israel, always the Zionist entity. The word is just like a cursed Israel. We can say it. Do not annul the right of the Palestinian people to their entire land, and do not entrench any rights therein for the usurping entity, meaning that they would never budge from their violent jihad until every person in Israel is either dead or a Muslim. This is what they say explicitly. I don't know, Finkelstein views them as the saintly people who only want peace and shoot rockets because they are peaceful people who want to end the blockade, not because they want to kill and murder and to control all of this place and expel all the Jews and make 7 million refugees or bodies. I don't know, for Finkelstein this is something that is humanitarian and good, and Israel for him everything that Israel does is monstrous. It reminds me midrash, a Jewish midrash in Bereshit Rabbah, one of an early medieval midrash legends about the Torah, the Jewish Bible, in which Abraham came early in the morning and took his donkey to sacrifice Isaac. So there is a question, he had a lot of slaves. Why did he have to do all of this work with the donkey? We know that later he took his slaves and the slaves came with him to sacrifice Isaac. So why didn't he let the slaves do all the donkey thing? So according to this midrash, Avram so liked God and God's command that he didn't wait for the slaves. He just woke up in the morning and decided to do everything by himself with his love of God's command to sacrifice his son Isaac. And the reason for that, the midrash says, is because love breaks the line and hate breaks the line. It means that when someone loves someone so much, he puts a blind eye and ignores everything else, even his shortcomings and even the bad things concerning this person. If he hates something, he also turns a blind eye to everything else, and he so hates a person that even a person can do very good things, he would ignore it merits because he so hates this person. So the same thing can be said about Finkelstein, that by his love of the Palestinians, he turns a blind eye to Hamas, to their violent jihadist ideas and their aggressive actions against Israel. And by his hatred towards Israel, he ignores very logical conclusions that Israel, the Israeli government, got into, and he really says that everything Israel does is to bathe in Palestinian blood and to just make war for no reason. We see that there is ample reason for Israel to start a war. So this is my answer to Finkelstein. Because your point of interest is not in the exact sciences, it is in the humanities, then your specific ways that you view the world, they indeed break the line. They indeed make you ignore many things. So it is not like saying E equals MC square. It is like saying my object of interest is something that I really love or really hate. In the extreme. And this is why your claim is problematic. Think about it.